Welcome to Documentaries, where we'll discuss a different documentary each week. A good documentary is a starting point to better understand our world and the people in it. Documentaries educate and entertain us. They allow us to see the world through someone else's eyes. Join us each week as we connect with our world and open up meaningful conversations with those around us. Thanks for listening. This week we chose The Witness, an American true crime documentary originally released in October of 2015. Produced and directed by James Solomon, it follows Bill Genovese as he investigates the 1964 murder of his sister Kitty. According to news reports at that time, she was attacked and killed while 38 people allegedly did nothing to help her. It's currently streaming on Netflix. This podcast will contain spoilers, so listen at your own risk. I am Della Grant.
I'm Claire Turner.
And we really like documentaries, so we thought we would have a podcast to talk about the documentaries we watch and like.
Yeah, so
this is our premiere episode.
When we totally know what we're doing.
Live from the dining room.
So tell me your thoughts on The Witness.
I really enjoyed watching it. I remember studying it and hearing about it, and every once in a while, you see articles that mention it or it's mentioned in pop culture. My heart really ached for Bill Genovese. Hearing his story and his narration, it was so personal, and seeing his family and hearing about how it had affected Kitty's families' lives, it was so touching, and I was glad that he made it. I feel like it gave him some closure. I really enjoyed watching the documentary. I wasn't really sure if I would enjoy it going into it, but I'm glad that I watched it.
Yeah.
How about you?
I'm glad I watched it too, and I'm glad he went to the trouble to make it. I majored in psychology in college, and even without majoring in psychology, I feel like it comes up in discussions about human nature all the time. But I remember in psych classes it being a case that was brought up over and over again to illustrate the bystander effect, that when something, some big crisis happens and there are a lot of people in close proximity to each other, they will all assume that somebody else is doing something about it, and so they won't. And that it also inspired a lot of theories about people living in urban settings and how, even though they're packed into apartments very tightly with each other, they sort of build these sort of walls between themselves and don't really want to get involved with what's going on right before their eyes or right on the other side of the wallpaper. And I had heard going into this that this documentary was done by her brother, and that he kind of, found some cracks in that narrative, that all these people had witnessed it and all had shrugged their shoulders and decided not to say anything or intervene in any way. And so I thought, well, that sounds like something I want to see, because the story initially sounded so hopeless and so damning of
and was used regularly to shame people into taking action.
Right.
Like, well, this is the Kitty Genovese effect. We have to do something. We can't just stand here and not do something.
Right. So I found it very hopeful to think, okay, if somebody has dug in and found that there really wasn't like 36 people who just looked at this and didn't care, I need to see that, because that will probably help reinvigorate some faith in humanity. But I wondered how, I guess she had several brothers, and he was the youngest of those. And so he was a teenager when this happened to her. Well, not even a teenager. He was 12? I think he was 12 when this happened to her. Or maybe 16.
He was 16 when she was killed.
He was 16, okay.
Right, and he was living with his family. They had moved out of the city, and Kitty was still living in Queens.
Okay.
So he didn't get to see her except on the weekends.
Right.
I think when he was 6, he moved out of the city.
Okay. So he was the youngest of the brothers that she had, but they had a very close relationship. And so it was interesting to see when he talked to his other brothers about this, the different reactions they had to it. Her other brothers seemed to have it. It was just sort of an interesting note in their family history, but it wasn't something they really dwelled on. And it was sad, but it wasn't something they really thought about a whole lot. And they didn't quite understand why he was thinking about it so much. Bill, on the other hand, was thinking about it to the point of obsession. He couldn't really stop thinking about it.
Right. He, at one point, said it affected every decision he'd made in his life.
Right. And so throughout the beginning of the movie, you see him, moving around the city and moving around the area where her apartment was and where the attack occurred. And he's doing all this in a wheelchair. And he, at some points, maneuvers himself out of the wheelchair to go upstairs and things in these old apartment buildings that aren't very accessible. And he's got really no legs left. He seems to be amputated just below.